everyone, in this video I'll be teaching you the Stafford Gambit. The Stafford Gambit opens with e4, e5, and this trap is played as black. Now we have dived into the king's pawn opening, knight to f3, and knight to f6, and this is the Petrov's defense Russian game. From here, the best move to play as white is knight takes on e5. From here you might see the other knight take on e4, but instead we see knight to c6, which is the Stafford Gambit of the Petrov's defense. Knight takes on c6 is a good move to play as white to take on the square. Now simply d takes on c6, and we have e5. So we're going to cover some different variations from here. First, we're going to cover the variation with e5, when you advance this pawn, and we're going to cover d3, where you just strengthen this pawn on the square. So first, let's cover e5, advancing your pawn forwards. Knight to e4, and d3, attacking this knight. This knight is in a very strong position here. It's attacking this very weak f2 square. There could be some ideas of sliding the bishop to c5, and this would be very unpleasant for white. d3, but we're not going anywhere. Our knight is going to stay here. Bishop to c5, double attacking this pawn with our bishop and knight. d takes on e4. If white tries to be greedy and decides to double up the pawns for a knight, then bishop takes on f2. You can't take, because if you take with the king, if king takes on f2, simply queen takes on d1. You lose your queen is hanging, and you have to move to e2. Then simply bishop to g4 with check, and you're forced to capture on f2. Then now you can pick up the queen with queen takes on d1. And this is a solid match-winning advantage for black, and a huge material advantage. Let's move on to the next trap. In this variation, e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to f6, knight takes e5, knight to c6, knight takes on c6, and d takes c6. This time, instead of advancing your pawn to this very nice e5 square, we play d3. So let's go ahead with d3. If d3, we simply have bishop to c5, and then we have bishop to g5, and knight takes on e4. From here, white must feel like the happiest person in the world. The bishop can go ahead and take the queen on d8. You've just blundered your queen, white thinks. But we're trading off our queen for white's king. Let me show you how. After bishop takes on d8, simply bishop takes on f2. And from here, you are forced to move to e2. And can you find the move to win the game as black? Bishop to g4, and this is mate. So the light square bishop covers f3, and the dark square bishop covers e3 square, and now the king can't move to d2 because of the knight, and the e1 square is covered by the dark square bishop, and the dark square bishop is defended by the knight. So this is a wonderful checkmate with your minor pieces, sacrificing the queen for white's king. Let's move on. e4, e5, knight to f3, and knight to f6. And we have knight takes e5, knight to c6, knight takes on c6, d takes on c6, and d3. Bishop to c5, a very natural move, and we have bishop to g5. Knight takes on e4. Now from here, if white knows the trap, and knows that you've got a checkmate in your hand, simply we see d takes on e4, bishop takes on f2. As I said, you can't take the bishop. If you see king takes on f2, then your queen hangs, like this. And then you have to move to e2. After e2, bishop to g4, the king is forced to capture on f2, and now you have to take with your queen. If you take with your bishop, simply white regains your queen. So the only winning move here for black is queen takes on d1, and you win the queen. So you have a match solid advantage. Let's move on to the final variation. e4, e5, knight to f3, and knight to f6, and we have knight takes on e5, as usual. Knight to c6, which is the Stafford Gambit. You remember this after the Petrov's defense, then knight takes on e5, knight to c6 makes it the Stafford Gambit. Knight takes on c6, d takes on c6, and d3. So this is the final variation of d3. Bishop to c5, and bishop to g5. Again, we go for the knight takes on e4. And now what happens if you see bishop to e3, cutting off any connections with this pawn on f2? Then bishop takes on e3. Black is happy enough to exchange bishops. F takes on e3. Now we have opened up the diagonal for our queen to give check to the king. Now, queen to h4 with check. If king to e2, this is bad, because simply queen to f2 is checkmate, and going back, you have to block with this pawn. If g3, knight takes on g3, h takes on g3, and from here, we see queen takes on h1, and you have won the rook. Going back, in this position, after knight takes, if white doesn't take the knight, you have to move the rook because it's being attacked. Rook to g1, knight to e4, discovery on the king. King to e2, and then if you see king to e2, queen to f2 is checkmate. And going back, if you don't move the king, instead if you block with the rook, with rook to g3, queen takes on h2, the rook attacks the queen. The rook is forced to move. So rook to g2, and queen to h4 with check. If king to e2, then bishop to g4. Rook captures on g4, and queen to f2 is checkmate. So these are all the variations of the Stafford Gambit. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video on the Stafford Gambit. Do write in the comments which one was your favourite, numbers 1 to 4. And remember to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.